So welcome again. Looks like we're just about ready to get started, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Annabelle Munson, and welcome to the Universal Business Aviation Operational Update Webinar and Meetup. I'm your host and moderator for today's session. So let's go ahead and get things started for today. For those of you who are uninitiated, today is May the 4th, and of course, it's also known as Star Wars Day. I thought I'd try out a new hairstyle in honor of Princess Leia in tribute, and I do have a very special panelist today. You may recognize him as Grogu, also known as Baby Yoda. He's going to be keeping me company. For those of you who do not know, I am, in addition to being a huge fan of all holidays, aka Christmas, I'm also a very big Star Wars fan. I may be even classified as a reasonably proficient nerd, but as a result, I celebrate today, and I want to wish you all a happy May the 4th. Whether you be Jedi or Sith, it's good to be back online with you this week after an almost 2-month break. So welcome back, and let's talk about what's happened since our last meetup in February. So are we really saying the long goodbye to COVID entry restrictions for good this time? I wish I had that much very coveted crystal ball and the clairvoyance to go with it, but it's just impossible to tell if the COVID mixed bag of restrictions, testing, and masking are truly a thing of the past. They certainly have almost disappeared for now across many, many destinations. What we can say is, wow, what a difference a few weeks does make. As we'll see in the Mediterranean regional feature, almost all the local restrictions in that region around COVID are gone or disappearing quickly, thanks to the magic of confirming you are fully vaccinated or with a PCR test for entry. And you see a lot of the same across popular destinations worldwide, much of Europe, the Caribbean, even Hawaii, and parts of Latin America. Life on the ground is looking quite normal, and that's a pleasant change. But as we'll discuss today, that much anticipated almost normal means a lot of pent-up demand for travel is unleashing at the moment. So the competition for heavy traffic in seasonal destinations is even more intense than usual. The holdout, well, that is Asia and the Asia Pacific region. It's falling in the category of not open or barely open across many different countries. I'll give you some highlights on those restrictions, but there is good news, as we've been reporting month after month, some changes. What are the trends we're seeing? So let's touch on the trends, and we'll dig into some of those more with our guests. World events are definitely coming back, and with them, the high traffic airport, parking congestion, and demand for services and hotels that goes along with it. We do love to hear that life is moving forward, and we're learning to live with the pandemic, but it does mean that planning ahead, examining trip feasibility in detail, and keeping big events in mind is once again a vital part of your operational mix. Training, retention, and meeting staffing challenges, also very top of mind. I had the great pleasure of meeting so many of you in person at the NBA IOC conference. That didn't come out right. Let me try that again. The NBAA, IOC, and S&D conferences that were in Los Angeles and San Diego. Thank you for my shout outs about the Christmas tree. Very appreciated. The one topic that was definitely on the agenda for so many of you, though, was staffing and education, because trip demand is so high. The emphasis was on bringing people up to speed, getting everyone proficient so that they can stay on top of things during this busy period. I know our continuing education team would say similar. Interest has been super high in both our essentials and scheduling class and our dispatch training class. So I want to say a shout out and hi to Gary, Juan, and the other members of the GRS team involved in our essentials class. There's actually a class happening today, so we'll hear more about that later. I also would be remiss on the trend outlook front if I didn't mention regulatory concerns, speaking of our reg services team. Absolutely everything regulatory is definitely at the top of many of your to-do lists, especially if you fly into the EU in particular. I'm going to let Adam Hartley from our global reg team break that down for you. But I'd say regulatory questions were one of the biggest reasons you all were stopping by to see us at IOC and S&D. Finally, trend-wise, I don't want to give you the impression that it's all leisure traffic, even though we're going to talk about the Mediterranean. It's definitely not all leisure traffic that's driving the current trip surge. Our mission advisors are actively managing hundreds of new leg requests per day, and it's clear many flight departments and companies are eager to get back to business in Europe, the Middle East, India, and into South America. In fact, we're even getting bulk trip planning requests for 2, 3, 4 trips at a time, sometimes months and weeks in advance, and with multiple legs within a region. So a lot to unpack there, but I do want to get to introductions for our speakers. So as far as that expert panel, I am actually assisting there a little bit further. I'm going to be doing our quick worldwide update with some of those operational highlights based on the notes from our trusted trip support experts, Russell and Adriel from our trip support teams. Thank you for that. Next, like I mentioned, Adam Hartley is going to be with us again. He's unpacking, like I just mentioned, everything you need to know about the hot topic of EU visa. And EES and ETS registration, key deadlines, as well as touching on other regulatory updates to keep you running smoothly. I'm thrilled to welcome our Mediterranean power team from Universal Aviation and Air to Ground. We have Dimitra from our UA Greece office back with us again, Gonzalo from UA Spain, Jacques, new with us on the webinar from our Air to Ground office, and Andrea in France, and Andrea back with us again from UA Italy and covering Turkey and Croatia as well. A warm welcome to all of you. All right, back to the operational stage. Let's cover those notes quickly so that we can dig into the regulatory and Mediterranean front. Let me start, like I mentioned, Asia Pacific. There is movement and it's positive, but it is, of course, the biggest block worldwide that still has the most restrictions. So let's just touch on what's new. New Zealand is opening in phases. You can indeed enter if you are from a visa waiver country, and prior to travel, you need to apply for a New Zealand Electronic Travel Authority. This is something that must be approved in advance. Let's move to Vietnam. All Vietnam destinations are open and no self-isolation is now required. In order to get access to the country, this is regardless of your vaccination status, vaccinated or not, a PCR test is required within 72 hours with a visa and travel insurance. All of that is required for entry, that PCR test within 72 hours or and as well as a negative, try that again, or a negative rapid test within 24 hours before departure from a country where the test is performed. Visa required prior to arrival. E-visa is accepted and takes 3 full working days to process. Keep that in mind for planning. And medical travel insurance that covers COVID-19 treatment with a minimum coverage of at least 10,000 US. Japan, clearly an in-demand destination still and on many wish lists, but it is still only open for business travel. Consult with your mission advisor for your specific needs and assess feasibility specific to your unique itinerary and case. Malaysia. So you're going to need to download an app from the Ministry of Health for access. There is a process to follow that starts when you are 1 week out from arrival. Includes a pre-test for COVID 2 days before arrival, again, a PCR test. A post-arrival test is also required within 24 hours. Good news, the app should walk you through the process and all the details. Now, I wanted to touch on Singapore and Thailand, but the good news is you can hear the updates for both Singapore and Thailand directly on a great video that our UA partner from the region, Yvonne Chen, put together for us. Great update direct from the source. So quick notes on Singapore. As of April 26, all fully vaccinated travelers whose travel history in the last 7 consecutive days prior to departure does not include travel to any country or region classified as restricted by the government may enter Singapore quarantine free now via any flight, of course, subject to entry approval. Unvaccinated or partially vaccinated travelers will need to deal with a stay-at-home notice and mandated quarantine at a declared place of accommodation, along with additional testing. Every flight into Singapore may carry vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers into the country. Thailand. As I mentioned, Lewis is dropping those links into the chat. It's indeed open for both for business and leisure travel. And as of May 1st, vaccinated passengers can enter by using the Thailand Pass with proof of insurance and are free to move around the country. Unvaccinated passengers need to deal with PCR testing 72 hours prior, the Thailand Pass system again, and then a secondary test about 5 days out. All right, moving on to Europe. Not much has changed across Europe regarding access, so we're not going to touch on each country, but we are going to just keep in mind vaccines are still the key. to getting in and moving around the country. The overall advice for Europe, since we are seeing many trips into the region, consider your specific itinerary for your passenger and crew. Consider your specific itinerary as well as your passenger and crew's vaccine status. Make sure everyone has their paperwork and digital passes in order and assess trip feasibility in advance. About the United Kingdom, the UK in particular, 2 notes. Very good news out of UA in London. So the RAF Northolt Airport is extending operating hours to 7 days a week starting June 1st. This is the first time in 5 years the airport will be accessible on weekends. This is wonderful news for accessibility into the London area, as this is a great location due to its privacy, security, and lesser congestion. Lewis, I think, has a link that you can get more information about Northolt hours and when that goes into place at the beginning of June. Also, a very important operational reminder for charter operators into the UK. So those Part 135 operators need to apply now for their UK TCO, that's third country operator permit, if you haven't already done so. The process for the TCO needs to be completed for the UK by the end of the year. If you do not, you will no longer be able to rely on your EASA TCO for entry into the UK and will end up being denied a UK charter permit. Let's touch on the Middle East briefly. For Saudi Arabia, we do have some changes there. Saudi Arabia has dropped all of its COVID vaccination and testing requirements for entry, but still requires COVID insurance. And Kuwait, similarly, Kuwait has also dropped vaccination and testing requirements, and that allows for greater access. Finally, another operational note that we'd be remiss in not touching on. The EASA fuel fake news that recently circulated. Many of you may have seen the dire sounding notice about impending restrictions on aviation traffic in the EU due to fuel shortages. On April 28th, EASA issued an official notice that this message was indeed a total fake and had no basis in fact. It does show how current geopolitical and economic concerns might easily be leveraged to create anxiety and start rumors across the industry, not surprisingly. Always be checking official communications channels when considering this type of information. All right, so that was your quick worldwide update. And if you've got questions, please be dropping them into the chat. And correct, as I see the chat, yes, not everything on the internet is true. Imagine. All right, I'd love to bring on our speakers next. I'm going to start off with Adam. Oh, but before I do that, one more reminder, Lewis, drop in that blog link because we are covering a lot and this will be your place to go get it as opposed to frantically writing down notes. So thank you for that, Lewis. Okay, so Adam, welcome back as always. So good to have you. I know the Reg Services team has been fielding a ton of questions about and also engaged in setting up operators for EU Visa for a few weeks now. Can you give us the latest and go over the key deadlines as well as touch on any other regulatory news that's timely for our operators?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Annabelle. Great job on the global update there. I really appreciate you doing the dance for a dozen different countries. So well done. Let's talk about the EU LISA and the requirements that are coming up in this new program. So we'll try to do this just quick high level on what it is, what the timelines are, and why does it mean, why is it important to our industry and our operators. So EU LISA, when people say that term, really refers to two things. It refers to both the regulatory body as well as the infrastructure system in charge of modernizing both exit and entry screening and pre-screening for travelers on behalf of the European Commission. So what that means for us is that they're requiring all carriers. So carriers is the term that's been thrown around, but think of the term carrier would be better as aircraft operator. Essentially, anybody who's going to be carrying travelers who would be required to have this screening or required to go through exit entry are going to be required to comply with EU LISA. And like with any good EU regulation lately, they take all the requirements and shove them all the way up to the carrier for their responsibility so that all of this pre-screening and things occur to limit the number of travelers who show up in the region without the appropriate documentation. So let's lay out how this is going to roll out for our industry. EU LISA is going to come out in a couple of different phases. Right now, we are very focused on carrier registration. So for a commercial operator, that can be as simple as providing your AOC because your core business is operating the aircraft. For our private non-revenue corporate operators, it's a little bit different where we've got to get to the legal entity itself and pin that legal entity down to register with EU LISA. So we're working right now in, they started back in February, but February through May, we're working on carrier registration. That's getting those basic contact details, company information, company documentation into EU LISA to get yourself your registration number and start that process. The way this is going to play out is come September of this year, those nationalities, those travelers who currently require a visa to travel to EU Schengen will be required to be pre-screened through EU LISA. If you are not able to pre-screen a traveler, they're calling out in the regulations that there is no secondary protocols. If you cannot pre-screen travelers, you cannot bring them, period. That is what they've laid out for us. But September, when we're talking about nationalities who currently require a visa, that's a smaller number of nationalities. We can certainly put it up here in the chat, Schengen EU countries that require a visa. But for your US-based, North American-based operators, not the most common nationalities that we're going to be carrying into Europe. That being said, you've got to be prepared. So because there is no secondary protocol, if you have somebody that the principal brings or somebody that the business wants to carry, you need to have the ability to do that. Where this becomes a much larger impact for US-based, North American-based, and really the whole Western world is going to be in the spring of 2023, where a program called ETIAS, ETIAS, will be rolling out. And what ETIAS is going to do in conjunction with EU LISA is essentially eliminate visa-free travel to the EU or the EU Schengen and replace that with visa-waivered travel. So think of a reciprocal program to what we offer here in the United States, the Signatory Carrier Visa Waiver Program for EU nationals and a few other nationalities to come to the US where they register with an ESTA and then arrive on a signatory carrier. This is very similar, except for in the EU system, we will all be signatory carriers. There is no choice on whether you want to do that or not. And then each of your travelers is going to have either a visa, if they are a visa required traveler, or an ETIAS, ETIAS. And it will be the carrier's responsibility to screen those travelers, passengers, crew will be exempt, screen those passengers prior to departure within starting 48 hours prior to that departure. How are we breaking this up? How is EU LISA breaking this up? We're trying to do this in batches. EU LISA is trying to do this in batches because they're here trying to bring every aircraft operator out there who has the potential to carry these type of travelers into their system. Let me tell you, there's a lot of them. There are a lot of aircraft operators with the potential to carry these nationalities into the EU. So right now, complete focus on carrier registration and the documentation that goes with that. Getting, for those who want Universal to work as a service provider, getting ourselves attached to those accounts and working through that process. In the summer, we'll be working on technical implementation and testing. Carriers, operators themselves, this is really what the EU, when I say we, I mean EU LISA and all of us complying with that program. In August, we'll be talking about process and procedure. So as this becomes a part of your checklist for your ops going to the EU, where does it fit in? What does your confirmation look like? All of that type of stuff. And then September for phase one go live, where those individuals who currently require a visa will now need to be pre-screened by that carrier. So an initial September go live, and then a much broader go live with a bigger group of travelers in the spring. So quick, fast, and dirty on EU LISA. And I'm sure there will be more questions. We'll be able to answer some of those as they roll in. Other regulatory requirements that are out there, and like Annabelle said, probably just a quick EU LISA update, a few regulatory updates, and then a grab bag of some important talking points. EASA noise, EASA Enviro. When we talk about Enviro, that's the noise environment, is still a requirement that many operators are catching up to. So before you operate an airplane into the EU now, it has to be registered with EASA, the noise certificate, and the AFM page with serial number has to be registered in an online portal specific to your operation. So that's something that operators are still, especially those who have not been back to Europe, since the pandemic, need to make sure is on their checklist for things to do. Other regulatory issues, masks for the United States were dropped. CDC, as of today, has started to challenge that record or challenge that court ruling. However, they are not going to bring the mask requirement back for the travel system for the U.S. at this time. CDC is still recommending masks for anybody using the U.S. travel system, but will not be requiring them or having security at airports or TSA or on airlines enforce those things. That does not mean that there has been any change to vaccination, testing requirements, attestation requirements. All of those things that have been in place for the United States for COVID are still in place for the United States for COVID. One other regulatory change, something that happened this week or last week, and we communicated a little bit about it, but a change from CBP in how a international regulation is being applied to business aviation and our industry, specifically for non-US based commercial operators who come to the United States. They've been having to, over the past several decades, for all of their commercial ops and point-to-point ops within the United States, have been requesting and receiving permission to proceed from point to point within the US. We had seen in global regulatory services that the enforcement, the regulatory citation, the process for that was really all over the place with CBP, and we continuously brought it to headquarters and the program managers there as a point of emphasis. After review, they realized that the regulation for a few decades has been misapplied. And we've been forcing non-US based commercial carriers to get permits to proceed that actually were not required. So they've posted a really good clarification on that. But essentially, if there's not cargo involved for a non-US based commercial operation to the States, it is very unlikely that a permit to proceed is required either. So some good outcome from some lobbying efforts as well. Just a couple quick things to highlight about flexibility and risk management. I can't let a group get away without talking about it. STEP enrollment. There is an active war zone going on in the EU for American citizens traveling abroad. STEP enrollment allows you access to State Department resources, embassy resources for emergency situations and non-emergency situations. And Universal can certainly help you set that up for your travelers on your trips. I would suggest that anybody traveling here personally use the STEP enrollment program to support their travel with both travel advisories as well as that quick access to embassies abroad when necessary. I know we're about to hear from our friends from the Mediterranean, but Greece and Italy charter permits. Don't wait until you have a trip. Don't wait until you have a pending trip or a thought of a trip. If the Mediterranean is on your potential agenda, let's get those requests in and get that permit applied for so that it doesn't inhibit your operations. And then last, Annabelle, really appreciate the shout out. I've been with the Essentials of Business Aviation for schedule and dispatch this morning. I'll spend some more time with them in the afternoon, but a fantastic training class and really taking all the things we're talking about here, the fundamentals of dispatch, as well as a really in-depth look at the global regulatory environment and bringing those things together to try to help schedulers and dispatchers be prepared for their operators, put the right things in place, maximize that flexibility, maximize your risk management, and go out into the world feeling confident. And with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Adam. I want to move on to our Mediterranean group. So welcome first on the list to Dimitra with our Universal Aviation office in Greece. Such a pleasure and a treat to see you again. Then let's go ahead and get started. last summer was very, very busy across Greece since you were one of the very first leisure destinations in Europe welcoming visitors in 2021. I think, if not the first. How is this year's summer travel looking for Greece?
Hi, Annabelle. Hello, everybody. It's really, really nice being here back with you all. So, yes, indeed, Greece experienced last summer a tremendous demand, which was translated into more than 30% increase of GABA traffic compared to 2019. Last year, last May, the minute it was announced that Greece is now open to leisure travel, there was a huge increase on the requests that came in. Even though this year is already really busy, things are more quiet. Demand is again increased and it's expected to reach or maybe even exceed last year's record numbers. But since there is no doubt or no waiting, we all know what to expect. Planning is more smooth and organized. We don't really feel the intense anticipation and the thirst for traveling we felt last year, where everybody was, on hold waiting to be released.
All right, so we'll be very busy, but perhaps not as urgently busy.
Yes.
So as far as COVID-related travel restrictions, anything to be aware of?
Yes, good news. My first COVID entry procedures were fully lifted. Everybody is welcome to come to Greece, vaccinated, non-vaccinated. There is no test, no forms, no certificates, nothing. On the everyday life also, May 1st, same day, restrictions were lifted regarding closed spaces like restaurants, bars, and all that. Entry is allowed to everybody, no matter of their COVID status, but masks to still apply in closed places until May the 31st, when they will review again the procedures. These changes are not yet permanent. Authorities will meet again on September, review how this went, and decide what to expect for autumn and winter's time.
Excellent. So experience on the ground, can you expand on that a little bit more for both passengers and crew?
I don't remember how pre-COVID was like, so I can say we're back to normal, but it feels like that. There are no queues for testing, no checking documents, no unavailable services, reduced capacity, social distances, and all of that stuff that has tortured us the past 2 years. I see that most of us picked up some habits during the other way. We wash our hands more, sanitize more, we keep our distance. Even some feel very comfortable wearing a mask in public, but it does start to feel like normal again.
Excellent news. So let's move on to those practical tips our operators need for planning their Greece visits. What are the hot spots and projected congestion areas? Anything different than normal to note?
Airline traffic is increased this summer, which means that business aviation ops is left with very few available slots and parking options. So apart from the usual popular destinations like Mykonos and Santorini, Corfu, Rhodes, Paros, Kefalonia, and Athens, of course, which will be even busier than last year, we now have Zakynthos, which is already almost fully booked for the whole summer, and Hania, which is a popular destination and was a good parking alternate, already showing limited availability of slots.
Well, that is a great segue, Dimitra, because parking is always an exciting topic when it comes to Greek operations. I will tell you, no less than 3 people ask me specifically about parking in Greece, especially about Athens, while I was at the IOC conference this past March, in fact. Where can operators expect to run into those parking issues? Can you dig into that a little more?
Yeah. Mykonos and Santorini have reduced the maximum ground time between May to September to 40 minutes instead of 60 minutes that used to be the previous years. Athens currently allows only 48 hours parking, which will be further reduced shortly, I believe. Corfu has unofficially advised that parking for more than 3 nights won't be available. Kalamata already refuses overnight parking. Paros and Rhodes have not provided any specifics, but a clear intention of not accepting long stays, and the list goes on. This means that operators should plan drop-off and pick up at the popular destination and position into smaller airports for the long stay. Same as last year, we do have some options available for you. Please contact our operations, consult with our staff, and together we will plan a smooth and effective trip for you. Popular destinations like Rhodes, Athens, Corfu, Heraklion should not be considered as parking alternates for positioning only. I know you don't believe me, but they do have a hard time accommodating their own traffic. They won't be approving additional traffic, I'm afraid. Sorry for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dimitra. So as far as any major events that are also taking place in Greece during this time that add to the competition for space?
Between June 6th to the 10th, Athens Airport Exhibition Center will host the Posidonia Expo. This is an international shipping exhibition attracting visitors from all over the world, from shipping companies and brokers to international maritime authorities. This means that Athens is expecting really heavy traffic those days.
Exactly. So we covered already, and so I will, Adam mentioned the permits necessary. Any additional regulations that are necessary or of note?
There is no change on permit processing, either for charter operators or for private flights. As Adam said, non-EU charter operators required to have in place their annual landing permit before operating into Greece. Please give us a week at least to issue the permit. And a small reminder here that domestic charter flights are not allowed to non-EU commercial operators. Private operators, on the other hand, need just a prior permit before landing to the joint use airports like Hania, Action, Kalamata, and a few more.
Excellent. And any new locations? I know last year when we spoke, you had some good news, and I think you have more good news to share.
Yeah, the good stuff now. A year ago, we took the chance of this webinar to announce the opening of our Mykonos branch. This year, we're very, very happy to announce the opening of our Paros branch. Universal Aviation Greece is the first and currently the only business aviation-oriented handler at this location. Paros is one of the popular destinations in the Aegean Sea, still recently served by a small domestic airport. A couple of years back, they changed into a new airport with a longer runway, able now to accept jets. And since then, there is a steadily increasing growth of its traffic. With Paros authorities and handling staff struggling with limited facilities and not being accustomed to the business aviation traffic, it was obvious that this would be our next Universal Aviation location, aiming to provide a smooth and efficient service to our clients.
Excellent news. So finally, wrapping up with you, Dimitra, and our Greek overview, what are the one or two essential pieces of advice you would give to operators right now?
With the fear of sounding confusing, and I'm really, really sorry for that. First, I will suggest the usual: plan ahead. Fix your travel plans and submit the handling request ASAP. We can apply only 14 days prior to your operations, but we will review your request. We will advise you on issues expected and make suggestions when we spot that something is unlikely to be approved. And when the time comes, we will submit for approval immediately upon slot application window opening. Now, what happens if you miss the opportunity of an early application or a trip comes up last minute? Last year's slot statistics shows that on the peak of the season, up to 40% of the booked slots in Mykonos were cancelled within the last 24 hours prior to its off. So don't get disappointed. If you absolutely want to visit a popular destination, reapply on a really short notice, and you may get lucky and book a slot that somebody else just released.
Excellent. So don't give up and definitely communicate your needs, but do try to plan in advance. Wonderful. Thank you, Dimitra. An absolute pleasure to have you back, and please stay online with us for some questions. All right, from here, I want to move to Spain, and a pleasure to welcome back Gonzalo to bring us up to speed on the latest news from his region. How is this year's summer travel shaping up for Spain as you look ahead?
Hello, everyone. Very happy to say that it's looking very good. We're expecting pretty much the same numbers we had in 2019, which was a great year.
That is awesome news. Any remaining COVID-related travel restrictions to be aware of?
Well, COVID restrictions are being eased like in all major European countries. Currently, regardless of the country of origin, as long as the passengers have a vaccination certificate approved by the EU, they no longer need to issue the sanitary QR form, but there are still some minor exceptions. For those passengers that are not vaccinated, they will need a negative PCR test performed within 72 hours and the sanitary QR form.
Got it. And what's the experience like on the ground now for travelers and crew? Also back to normal?
We believe that passengers and crews are experiencing an almost back to normal feeling when traveling to Spain. This feeling is increasing every day as more and more restrictions are being removed. The last restriction removed this 20th of April were face masks. They are no longer required inside buildings or, for example, airport terminals such as RFBOs. However, they still recommend the use of face masks when keeping social distance is not possible.
All right, and let's look at what GA operators need to keep in mind for successful trips regarding hotspots and projected congestion areas.
Well, as usual, hotspots, Ibiza, Palma, Mallorca, Menorca, Canary Islands, in general, all Southeast locations are going to be busy.
And it sounds like we can expect parking issues at all of those same places.
Yes, Ibiza, Palma, Mallorca, Menorca, and Valencia, parking congestion for sure.
All right, so back to that planning ahead. Any new regulations to be aware of?
Well, there is a new regulation that will affect operations into Barcelona for single-engine turboprop aircrafts with an MTOW under 2,000 kilos, such as Cessna Caravan, Pilatus, these kind of aircrafts, are no longer allowed to operate in that airport.
Okay, and big events, anything that's competing for space and in demand?
Well, as advised, summer season in the southeast coast of Spain and the Balearic Islands, we can expect congestion issues starting in June until the end of September.
All right, so just the entire period. I understand we have new locations and an expanded network in Spain since we last saw you last summer on the webinar program. Can you tell us more about those?
Well, I am very excited about that. We have absorbed a well-known and established in the south of Spain local handling company called Andalucía Aviation, which has added to our network in Spain 6 new locations. And by the end of this month, we will be opening Menorca.
Excellent. So expanded coverage, also good, especially considering how busy you all will be. So like to wrap up, of course, with the pieces of advice. What advice can you give our operators for travel this summer?
Well, as I always say, and many of my colleagues, please try to send your handling request as soon as possible. Even though in most of the airports, parking and slots cannot be requested until 15 days prior to the arrival schedule, it is good to have to request as soon as possible, so at least the airport authorities are aware of your desired dates. Secondly, but also very important, try not to change the initial schedule too much. I know it's not easy, but the less changes we make, the more chances we have to get the parking and slot desired.
Right. I know they're all going to do their best, Gonzalo. And in the meantime, you will make it happen. I have every confidence. Excellent. Well, thank you so much again, Gonzalo. An absolute pleasure, un placer. And I will now move on to an update from France and a new guest for us, a new panelist, Jacques from our Air to Ground Concierge Service. Such a distinct pleasure to welcome you. All right, let's get started. Like some of our other Mediterranean locations, France also experienced a travel resurgence last summer. What are you expecting for this coming summer?
Hello to everyone. Well, we're expecting a very strong start of the season. It's already happening in May. We have the Cannes Film Festival. We have the Monaco Grand Prix, which it's bringing a lot of people already.
Excellent. So expect congestion to start immediately. Any remaining COVID restrictions that everyone should be aware of?
Well, like the rest of Europe, it's pretty much easing up. There's still the vaccination, full vaccination required, or the PCR test with the 72 hours. That's pretty much it for the moment.
All right. So very accessible with vaccine and PCR testing. What about any local, like on the ground restrictions and what's the experience like for passengers and crew once they arrive?
Well, it's pretty much back to normal. It feels very, back to what it was before. No mask, thankfully, not on airports, not in FBOs. it's pretty in medical facilities you have to, but not inside, neither on the street. So it's very, very
So it
relaxed.
sounds like a great time to visit France. So as far as practical operational tips for our GA operators, what kind of advice do you have?
Well, I would say send your request as soon as possible. That's a basic one to make sure we can accommodate all the aircrafts.
And I heard as we were talking about your topics a couple of days ago, something that I did not know and was emphasized was that for France in particular, that should you make changes to your itinerary and your requested services, that those changes could result in you losing all of your place essentially in line, and you would go to the back of the line to get services and slots, etc. Correct?
It is very true. Yeah. That's well, it's not applied on all airports, but Nice especially tend to do that. We can sort of save it, but it's the less changes, the easier, of course.
Definitely wise advice there. Projected congestion areas and other hotspots. You mentioned Nice.
Yeah, I mentioned Nice. Corsica will most probably be very busy. All the airports there will probably experience congestion. Figari, which is the further south, close to Sardinia, that's the one that's very much in demand. And usually you can't even park there. You can just do a quick turnaround, unfortunately.
Right, so back to planning ahead and then staying flexible. Events, I know there are quite a few in France. Anything during this time period that could be causing additional competition for services, hotels, etc.?
So the events, like I mentioned before, there is the Cannes Film Festival, there's Monaco Grand Prix. Through summer, it goes on to September. The end of September is a very strong event, which is the Monaco Yacht Show. Okay. That has become a very big event, as big as the film festival and the Grand Prix. So yeah, it's gonna go all the way through.
It's gonna go fast. So any new regulations to be aware of for operating into France?
No, it's pretty much the same. It's just for private charter operators. Make sure you go through the Paris office. That's very important. Yes, because they are doing all the permits. So, and as Adam was mentioning before, the noise certificate is always something that is important to send. Noise being an issue that's more and more sensitive, especially in Nice. There's a lot of noise restriction in Nice. Yeah, so very important.
So definitely consult if going to Nice.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, Jacques, what are the final pieces of advice you would give to our operators if considering operating into your region?
Well, like I say, send the request, early as possible. And once you sent it, but you feel like you want to make a change, always check with us. Always check with a Universal. Somebody on the ground, either at ground or Universal, before we do the changes, so we can save the situation and not the back of the queue situation. And the fuel also, no restriction, but fuel can be difficult on departure, so do it on arrival, much easier, or a day before departure, and be patient.
That was my favorite, was the be patient. Yes. Excellent advice for all operators across the Mediterranean, I think. Jacques, an absolute pleasure to have you. I hope you'll be back with us again sometime soon. And from here, I want to move to talk about Italy, Croatia, and Turkey with our friend Andrea and our expert from the region. Welcome back. Pleasure to have you. He's definitely a webinar veteran. He's been on several now. He's going to give us that summer outlook for Italy, Turkey, and Croatia, since he's an expert across all of those absolutely stunning destinations. So let's start with Italy. Italy had a successful season last year. How is this year's expected Mediterranean season expected to play out for you?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Annabelle, for inviting me again. This season will be even more interesting and busy. Many high-level and interesting events are planned, spread in all Italian regions. There are schedules and also ad hoc events, such as private events, weddings, birthdays, corporates, board meeting, etc., etc.
All right. And the experience on the ground, is everything back to normal? What can crew and passengers expect? And are there COVID restrictions still in place?
All activities have returned to normal. There are only generic precautions like masks to protect in high-density indoor environments. Italy is fully open to foreigners at all levels. Currently, a vaccination certificate or a negative test are sufficient to enter the country. From the 1st of May, the digital PAX locator form is not necessary anymore.
Good update. And let's focus for a moment on those practical tips our audience needs. Hotspots and projected congestion areas, anything different than normal to note?
The hotspots are Milan, Venice, Rome, and Naples. We expect to have the same busy areas as always: Venice, Tuscany, Naples, and the island of Sicily.
All right. And parking issues, any suggestions for parking alternates as well?
For Venice, there are many airports nearby, like Verona, Treviso, and Trieste, that can absorb the high parking demand. In Tuscany, we suggest Milan, Rome, and Genoa as hassle-free alternates. And by the way, proud to say that Universal is adding one new location in Italy by the end of May, as we are opening a new facility in Genoa Airport. For Naples, we had the airport of Salerno, which was the perfect backup, but unfortunately is closed till next year, and therefore it's not an option anymore. These solutions are Rome or Olbia in the island of Sardinia. No matter where you're heading, we've got you covered.
In good hands with Andrea and team. So major events that are competing for services, hotels, and parking, anything of note?
Yes, major events are the furniture and fashion shows and the Formula One Grand Prix Milan, the boat show in Genoa, and the Venice Film Festival. Be aware that we can always arrange all the relevant services like tickets, ground transportation, special security services, and so on.
All right. And then permits, just like Greece, also required. Anything else of note from a regulatory standpoint?
No, Italy is subject to European EASA legislation for both commercial and private operations. The only differences to highlight compared to the other European countries might be on how taxes are applied, such as passengers tax, VAT, and duties. But of course, we are here to assist our customers also on this matter.
Excellent. You're also an expert, of course, like I mentioned, on Turkey and Croatia. Any advice regarding those destinations as well?
Yes, in Turkey, the most touristic airports with limited parking availability are Bodrum, Dalaman, and Izmir. Alternates are Denizli, Bakeshir, and Isparta airports. In reference to Croatia, the only airport which has a low parking availability is Split, but there are plenty of airports nearby that can work as repositioning options. One of those is Dubrovnik. For both countries, we are at disposal for all arrangements, including cost, quotation, and dedicated supervision.
All right, and let's wrap up, Andrea, with your final pieces of advice, as always, for operators.
I won't repeat the plan ahead motto. I would say stay prepared to repositioning legs for long stay parking requests in high traffic destinations. Our Milan Linate OCC office is your valuable point of contact. We have an holistic approach as we consider all different aspects in a whole. So get in touch with us for your successful mission.
All right, Andrea, you know, I would be there as soon as I could if I could. Few things in the way, but I will get there soon. Thank you very, very much. And I'm going to move from here to your questions now that we've covered a lot. And thank you all for being active in the chat. I see that we're getting a lot of questions answered there. So be sure if you have a question of your own that you're looking through what's happening in the chat, because a lot of good information is already being covered. Do remember you can save the chat by using the ellipses in the bottom corner, save it as a text file. Plus, we'll also include all of the chat as well as the video in a link that's going out on our Ops Update email tomorrow. Let me go through a few of these pre-submitted questions. I think we actually have covered some of these, so I may edit a few, but again, do not forget that we're going to try to wrap up right at 1 o'clock, which we're going to be in a bit of a mad rush to get there. But since that's the case, if we do miss your question live, we will be sure to circle back with you and get you an answer. So please keep that in mind. All right, so a couple of questions that have already come across. I have one specific too. Let's go ahead. About 270 days to enter regarding the limit on your vaccine validity or 14 days prior to booster. Russell, I think we talked about this and it was a short answer.
Yeah, Annabelle, once you're boosted, that's it. There's nothing more. But once you're boosted, there is no starting the clock over again.
Got it. All right. Good advice overall and good to know. So I have a question specific to Hungary regarding COVID-19. Any update there?
Annabelle, Hungary's actually removed all their COVID restrictions for testing, vaccinations, etc.
Excellent. So wide open as far as Hungary is concerned. Thank you, Adriel. So I think this is already being answered in the chat. If not, you can tell me, but it sounds like we've answered the question about my flight department's already registered directly with EU LISA. Will Universal be able to manage the account? And it sounds like that was a yes. I believe I saw Juan answer that in the chat.
Yeah. So, and just to follow up on that, Annabelle, if somebody feels comfortable and they've been able to navigate the carrier registration process, we still want but is utilizing Universal for TSS missions, trip support, we definitely want to circle back with them. There'll be a lot of information coming out through us and through our marketing team, talking about how to come in during the testing and technical implementation phase, so that we're ready to stand up and run at the end of the summer when the requirements come into play. This is really about Universal. Our approach is working on the system-to-system channel. So there are 3 different ways that somebody can comply with EU LISA, something I didn't cover earlier. System-to-system, which is a direct connection. Think the way that Universal communicates with CBP and EA and APIS. And then there's also going to be web portals and a mobile app. And so through our technical implementation and testing, we both want to stand up the system-to-system channel for Universal to manage on your behalf, as well as support you in setting up a your direct portal and mobile app as your secondary forms of compliance.
Great. Thank you, Adam. All right. From here, I have a question that's a little more specific to particular regions and countries. I had a customer ask, our upcoming trips are to Thailand, Indonesia, and Japan. What's the latest, if there can be a brief rundown on those restrictions?
Yeah, Annabelle. So for Thailand, they are open for business and leisure. You have to do everything through the Thailand pass. You have to have $10,000 worth of medical insurance for COVID-related instances. By doing that, that gives you free circulation. Unvaccinated passengers can enter using a PCR test and submitting that through the Thai pass. There is a quarantine period of 5 days. You test out. You'll do a test on day 5. If you're negative, you're free to go. The Thai pass is probably going to be phased out sometime midsummer, so stand by for that. Indonesia is open for both business and leisure travel as well. PCR test is required 48 hours prior to your departure. Health insurance of $25,000 for COVID-related, quarantine-related instances. If you're not fully vaccinated, there is a 5-day quarantine period. You do a test on day 4, again, negative, you're out. You can apply for an exemption if you're unvaccinated through the Ministry of Health. That takes a minimum of 7 working days. So if you're unvaccinated and you're going to apply for that, you're applying to the government. 7 days probably means closer to 14 or so. So just put that into your planning tool. And visas are required for Indonesia. Japan, they are open for business flights only. Crews have to self-isolate for the time that you're on the ground, but for a maximum of 7 days. The vaccine and the entry requirements are really based off of your schedule, where you're coming from, and your travel history. So again, that needs to be really do a deep dive on that when we start doing the trip planning. And then there are exemptions that can be applied for. So you need to leverage your local context to help apply for those exemptions.
All right. So once again, very specific to itinerary and the case-by-case basis of your trip. Thank you for that, Russell. So I wanted to jump over here, Adam. There is a question that we got in, actually 2 that were related to Canada. The question was, Wondering if you have any insight, as we've been experiencing very high wait times for clearance in Canada. We have reached out to several pilots and other operators, and it seems to be a concern with a lot of people. Any suggestions for visiting Canada more smoothly would be appreciated.
Well, I've heard I've heard some of this feedback as well, and I think there's a couple of different ways to approach it. So number one, I think some people are waiting to clear for officers and meet officers who maybe aren't coming that would be eligible for a telephonic clearance, as well as there's programs available. So the CanPass corporate air program is a fantastic one, and we can publish a link on that as well. But CanPass corporate air allows you to arrive into remote locations, as well as guarantee that as long as you're arriving within your tolerance and with the people that you had notified previously, that you will never see a Canada Border Services agent. So there are a variety of different ways to get around this. It does sound like Canada, in a generic sense, is doing less telephonic clearances. So if that is a something that is important to you, being proactive about it and looking into CanPass Corporate, we can certainly help you do that, is one option that's out there.
All right, thank you, Adam. All right, so, and I know I totally lied and said, oh, we're going to be done by 1. I still want us to get done as close to 1 as possible. So let's check in with Lewis, see if we have any questions that haven't already been answered in the chat that we need to toss out to the group.
Hey, Annabelle, thanks. Yeah, we had a few. Back to Canada. Adam, is CanPass still operational? Corporate CanPass still operational?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe that the airport funneling in Canada has ended. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is no more COVID funneling or limitations on AOEs due to COVID restrictions.
And ETIAS question. What do we see the format for verifying and communicating EES and ETIAS?
I think what we're asking is what is that going to look like? So EES is a little bit different. So let's talk about EES, exit entry screening. When we see a modernization of EES and exit entry screening starting in September, the most common way you're going to see that show itself is, instead of queuing up for passport stamps, you'll be doing fingerprints, or those nationalities required will be doing fingerprints and photographs, something much more similar to the U.S. visit, U.S. clearance type program. As far as pre-clearance on EU LISA, when you're screening those individuals prior to departing your point of origin, you'll submit your manifest or passenger manifest, and then get an almost immediate response. They're calling it within a second, especially if you have a system-to-system channel that will give you an okay, not okay message. What's important to note is that our fundamentals, our best practices of understanding all the travel documentation of all of our crew and passengers prior to trying to screen somebody is important. EU LISA is not going to be there for us to screen and find individuals with problems. We want to have a good understanding, make sure that everybody has given us confirmation that they do have an ETIAS on file, given us a copy of their visas, all those things that we do to plan and put our trip together. We want to make sure that we're still doing. EU LISA will just confirm that those docs are in fact valid in a quick response message back to you upon submission. I think that covered it.
Thanks, Adam. One more quick EU LISA question. Everyone's saying to expedite EU LISA, but how long is it taking to actually get the approval answer back from the authorities?
So this is like we said, we're doing this in batches. EU LISA is doing this in batches. The registration documents from the application are coming back pretty quick, within a week or so, depending on how clear the documentation is that's being sent, and there's no issues with the application. But then there's a back and forth. So there's security terms and conditions that have to be signed off on, the additional document to add a service provider if you choose to do so at that time. So there's a definite back and forth with the registration process that I would say from beginning to end takes 2 to 4 weeks probably. And some of that delay can be on your own side of the operator getting the proper documentation from what we've experienced, as well as the regulator having lots and lots of applications coming their way and then having to sort through the application. So give yourself about a month for registration or so.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to ask this one to Jacques because we've got a couple questions on it. Jacques, is the France is the European Digital Passenger Locator Form still needed?
As far as I know, it's still needed. It's rarely checked. By experience, in the last months, we were not asked to provide it. Customs don't ask it, but it is still needed. Unfortunately, it may be lifted, shortly, but so far as I know, it's still needed.
Thank you. And then what about if a passenger is driving into France from Switzerland and the passenger is vaccinated?
If it's vaccinated, I'm pretty sure there's no issue. Fully vaccinated, and you can provide, the proof. You carry your card, vaccination card. I'm pretty sure it's all okay.
Thank you. I'm going to throw this one out to the group for whoever wants to answer, but has there been any conversation of Brazil relaxing the vaccine requirement for crew entry?
I have not heard of any conversations like that.
One more regarding EU LISA. An airplane is registered or is listed through the 135 certificate holder. Do we need to list separately for the Part 91 entity?
It depends a little bit on the management situation and how the operational control for that aircraft or that operation. So there is a carrier registration number that you should be able to file under your individual management company to meet these requirements and have all that trip information tied back to that management company. But there are some unique scenarios out there. So probably one I want to take directly, but you are able to, or management companies are able to file on behalf of many of their 91 operators, depending on their operational control situation.
Great, thanks, Adam. And Annabelle, I think that covered all the questions that we had in the chat.
Thank you. And I know that there was one that I accidentally skipped on, and don't know if Dimitra and Andrea still have a few minutes, and we can answer this one, or we can always follow up with the operator. The question was, what are great BBJ staging airports for supporting owners' yachts in the Western Greek Isles and Western Italy, especially starting in July? It's very specific.
I can answer for Italy. There is Olbia in Sardinia, Genoa, and also a couple of locations in Sicily, such as Palermo or Trapani, that can accommodate a BBJ and that are also close to ports.
For Greece then, all the Ionian Sea Islands, Corfu, Zakynthos, Kefalonia can accept the flight, drop off the passengers, and then we have a smaller airport, mainland at the west of Greece, that we can provide parking for the aircraft.
I thank you, Dimitra and Andrea, as always. Appreciate the expertise. And thank you again to all of our panelists. And Louis, if that covers it, I know we're a little over time and we've had to lose some people to their own schedules, but this program is recorded. So that link again will be in the Ops Weekly update that comes out tomorrow. So look for it there, along with a transcript of the chat. All right, so as we close out, I did want to let all of you know that a good number of our panelists, Gonzalo, Dimitra, Andrea, are all going to be at eBase coming up here at the end of May. So if you happen to be in the region, if you're in Geneva for the show, definitely stop by the Universal booth and say hello to them. I know they will be very happy to see you and talk operations. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing the rest of you here virtually, hopefully in June. Unfortunately, it won't be Star Wars Day, but I'm sure we'll find something else to celebrate. Most importantly, having you as our guests is celebration enough. All right, as always, definitely, please send me your ideas. You have no idea how many times our topics and guest panelists come from some of the input that we get from you. Loved hearing from people at schedulers and IOC, so get out that email, operationalinsight@univway.com. Send me a note and let's see if I can't get your favorite topic on the agenda. All right, a pleasure to have you all. Thank you for being with us, and I look forward to being back together sometime in June. So look for that update in your email. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.